The scale of human suffering and hardship inflicted on our people over the last 9 years is never mentioned by the government. The reason is because they'd have to explain why our people have endured so much. They'd have to admit, as we've said, that austerity was never, let's repeat it, austerity was never an economic necessity. It was always a political choice. And the choice the Tories took was that the bankers, their friends, many now populating the front bench here, they would never have to pay for the crisis they caused through their speculation. Instead, they determined...
Don't be ridiculous.
You did all right, didn't you?
The Chancellor says you caused it. Yeah. This is the man who was selling the CDOs to the Deutsche Bank. This is the man who sold them. The Deutsche Bank was a major contributor to the economic crisis we face. They've got a nerve coming here blaming others when they caused it. But what they determined that they would not pay for the crisis. They would not pay for the crisis. They determined that the rest of people would, the rest of our society. But you know, they also took the view. Didn't they? Never let a crisis go to waste. So they used it as the excuse to cut taxes to the corporations and the rich. They've made £47 billion of cuts in our public services. And on their plans, they will have given away £110 billion in tax cuts to the corporations by 2022. And to ramp up the profits of these corporations, they've sold out our public services to them. £9 billion worth of contracts in the health and social care field were handed out to private companies in this year. Outsourcing under this government has been exposed this week for the racket that it is. A report by the think tank Reform showed outsourcing contracts wasted £14.3 billion of taxpayers' money in the past 3 years. Nothing in the Queen's speech even acknowledged these rip-offs, let alone promising action to reverse them. And I found nothing either in the Queen's speech that addresses the scandal of the industrial scale of tax avoidance and money laundering that's staining the reputation of our country. Today, the Transparency International published its report at your service. That report shows how, I quote, UK service providers have been involved in some of the most egregious cases of corruption in our time. And from the looks of this Queen's speech, the government will continue to do nothing for it. A near decade of the grotesque mismanagement of our economy by successive Conservative Chancellors. I'm on my third in 3 years. The new Economics Foundation has shown that austerity has suppressed growth by almost £100 billion. That's more than £3,600 per household. And after 9 years of stuttering growth, GDP even went backwards in the last quarter. Public debt was meant to peak at 70% of GDP in 2013, 2014, only for it to rise to 86% of GDP in 2018-19. And for all its stale claims of reducing the deficit, the reality is the Conservatives have simply shifted that burden onto the shoulders of head teachers, councillors, NHS managers and police chiefs. These are the people who have had to make the tough decisions, not government ministers. These are the people who have had to face up to the undermining of their services by these cuts. Mr. Speaker, as the government has a working majority of -45, it's obvious that this Queen's speech is little more than a pretty crude election stunt. Throughout the Prime Minister's and Chancellor's various interventions in the House or in the media, they've depicted this programme as the people's priorities. Look, as a political artisan, I can admire a good turn of phrase, and I congratulate apprentices. I've been here 22 years. It's a long apprenticeship. Thank you. and you know, sometimes the apprentice can point out the truth as well. Absolutely. And look, I just say, I do admire a good turn of phrase, but I just have to say I congratulate the creatives in whatever PR agency the Conservative Party now uses for coming up with it. It's, you know, it must have tested very well in the focus groups, etc. But that's all it is. It's a slogan, it's a phrase, it's nothing else. The reality, as demonstrated in this Queen's speech, is that after coming up to a decade of harsh and, yes, brutal austerity, a few cynical publicity stunt commitments to paper over the massive cuts in the NHS, in our schools, in policing and in care, they go nowhere near what is needed. Certainly.
Quite rightly said that the Conservatives look after their own, and I agree. That's why we have cut taxes on 32 million working people. That's why we are cutting taxes on businesses that are generating growth and employment for the people of this country.
Tragically for so many at the lower levels, all those tax cuts have been cancelled out by cuts in benefits, by the introduction of universal credit. And some of the, I think some of the most vulnerable, in particular disabled people, forced to the wall as a result of the brutal implementation of the WCA, the Work Capability Assessment, other benefits, scrapping of the Independent Living Fund. There's a litany of attacks on ordinary working people that this side should be consider a disgrace. Yep. What people need now, Madam Deputy Speaker, is real change. Real change in our economy to face up to the existential threat of climate change, Labour's green industrial revolution. Real change to provide the real scale of resources our NHS, our schools and our police services need. Yes, raised through a fair taxation system where we will tackle tax evasion and tax avoidance. And real change to bring forward the scale of investment our infrastructure needs to compete in the global economy and, yes, meet the challenges of the fourth industrial revolution. And real change to ensure that our people share in the prosperity we will create through decent wages, ownership and, yes, ending the rip-off of privatisation. Only a Labour government can bring about that real change. The real change our country needs after a lost decade under the Tories. What does it say? It says it's time for a Labour government. Yeah.